All right, so it's time to do the video that I was dreading to do the most, which is to talk a little bit about me and my background and my career as it comes to product marketing. Full caveat, this is just obviously one career, one data point for you to think about whether you're just trying to get into product marketing or if you're trying to grow your career and level up your product marketing. So you can say I got really lucky. I basically graduated in the height of the recession from University of Texas, hook 'em horns. And I was one of the few marketers, I would say, that Microsoft recruited into their associate product marketing program. So I actually went and interned at Microsoft in between my junior and my senior year before going on and taking a full-time role after graduation. So at the time when you actually interviewed at Microsoft, you were given an option to interview with two teams that you didn't get to choose. And then from there, the two teams would figure out, who they wanted to kind of take. And the two teams that I actually interviewed with were Windows back in the day, which dates me a little bit because as you can imagine, that's evolved. And the other team was SQL Server. I literally studied finance and marketing in college. I had no idea what a server even was. So walking into that interview, I had done a ton of research of just trying to understand what is a server, what is a database, why is that important? Keep in mind, servers to me were nothing more than these big, loud, black machines that were hidden behind closets at the time. So my first role at Microsoft was actually to help integrate a product that they had bought. It was a company called Data Allegro with some fast track, literally that's what it calls, reference architecture, and take that to market. My job was essentially to work with the US sales team as well as the Data Allegro sales team and figure out how we take the product. So at that point, how do we name it? How do we price it? How do we package it? What are the partners or the channels that we want to take it to market? And then how do we essentially make money off of that across the United States? After I did that for a year, I got the pleasure and privilege, frankly, of launching SQL Server 2012. Again, that dates me a little bit. But what I learned through that role was really how do you drive magic across 30 plus cross-functional teams. Everything from legal, compliance, customer support, customer success, onboarding, obviously demand gen, pricing and packaging. At that time, we had moved from pricing from procs to cores, which is a really nerdy thing. I won't go deep into it, but essentially it was changing the way that we were monetizing. And so you can imagine companies never like it when you go back and say, hey, cough it up, we need some more money. So how do you drive a process across 30,000 salespeople in the United States to arm them to have that conversation with the global 4,000 or 5,000, excuse me. After completion of a successful launch, I will say that role, I was 23, I had no business launching a product that was $2.1 billion in annual revenue, but that role really taught me like the scale of what global marketing, well, even at the US can do. I was managing $1 million plus budget. As I mentioned, all the different cross-functional teams. I learned so much from just all of these great operational thinkers of how do you drive a gigantic organization to get something to market and doing it in a successful, accelerated way. After that, I actually went into channel marketing. So on SQL, as I mentioned, it's a database. So there's a lot of ISVs or independent software vendors or SIs, system integrators that actually build technologies upon them. So maybe an easy analogy would be the iPhone and apps, right? There's someone at the Apple department or at Apple who literally thinks about how do we get developers to build apps so that we can monetize onto the apps platform. And obviously they take a percentage of every app that's sold. And similarly, for SQL Server, we were going to businesses to build, say, financial apps, expenses apps, time management, construction apps, et cetera, on top of SQL Server, and then using that as a sell-through method of gaining more market share and obviously more revenue. I learned a tremendous amount in that role of understanding how to incentivize channels. So things like reach, frequency, yield, how many partners are we able to tap? How often do they transact on our platform? How much do they yield? What's the margin that we're able to get? So I will say those 3 years in Seattle taught me the fundamentals of product marketing. Like I said, everything from core go-to-market with Fast Track, really thinking about product launch across a multitude of teams in quite a complex environment on a large product with $2.1 billion in revenue, and then thinking about how to work with channels, ISVs, SIs, and thinking through channel incentives, and also how do you drive sell-through, sell-with models. After that, you know, where life works in funny ways, and I got an opportunity to go out to Singapore and actually work with a guy that I had met in Seattle who had relocated there to, at the time, run the Windows Server business. I think he had seen that I had done a good job with the SQL Server launch, and so I was, you know, told at 24, hey, if you want, there's an opportunity to go out to Asia, to Singapore, and launch Windows Server to Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand, Korea, because that's actually how we defined APAC, and I think it's still defined that way at Microsoft. In some ways, it was the scariest thing I've ever done, but in some ways, like when, at least for me at that age, I didn't have fear, right? And so I cut ties, broke up with my boyfriend, you know, gave up the apartment, left the community and also the States, and moved out to Singapore where I didn't really know anyone. Luckily, I had, you know, the support of Microsoft in terms of corporate housing and just, you know, white glove treatment of getting settled in. But it was really scary, and in full transparency, I was so stressed. I actually lost a patch of hair off the side of my head. I think there's actually pictures of me with, as you can tell, black hair, like a little white bald spot hanging out about size of $0.25. And you know, a lot of it was just me pushing myself and driving, working extra hours, traveling, and that insecurity and that self-loathing of like, you're an imposter, what are you doing? You don't deserve this role, right? How do you make sure that the people that took a bet on you and made this happen, like you actually deliver, more importantly for yourself. And you know, Singapore is what, 15 hours behind, now 9 hours ahead, however you want to look at it. So for me, it's not like I called my mom and cry, right, if things weren't going well. Like, I learned, more importantly, beyond, you know, Asia and just like, you know, living and having empathy for all types of different people working in different markets, but I learned what I was made of. And I think a lot of you probably go through adversity at different points in your life, whether that's health, whether that's with your career, whether that's with your family, whether that's friends or in relationships. In many ways, I really do believe that you learn more about yourself during those hard times and those tough times because you learn what you're made of, right? And that's what resilience and grit, these like buzzwords that are thrown around, really boiled down to. I definitely don't think I thought aloud about what are my personal values and what's important to me and where are my limits when things are going wonderful, right? I'm just laying back and having a cocktail. But it's when things are really being hard, I'm being pushed, I'm pushing myself to limits physically, right? Mentally, emotionally, that I never had done before. I really look back at my life and think, you know, when I made it through those first 3 months in Singapore, like I can make it through anything. Just that resilience, and again, just feeling very alone, very lonely, but also that like this has to work, right? Because I just moved my whole life out here. I just cut ties, like I can't just move back. Life works in funny ways. Singapore was an amazing experience. I highly recommend for anyone who's ever had interest in this to do an expat stint. Not only did it change me professionally, I think it rounded out my marketing in terms of how much empathy, as I said, I had for different types of buyers around the world. Developed markets and developing markets, night and day, right? If you think about Philippines versus Vietnam versus Singapore, night and day in terms of how you drive transaction, how you grow a business there. Australia, very similar to America, as you can imagine, in the business environment. Korea, completely different, right? That's a whole nother topic that if you guys are interested in, I'm happy to do a whole session on that. But what I will say is if you're ever interested, have ever thought about working abroad, living abroad, especially in today's global environment, I think many people respect that. I think, like I said, personally, do it for yourself. Like it changed me as a person more than it ever changed me as a professional. I moved back, and you know, as these things go, I didn't know anything about Silicon Valley. Some of you might be in the Valley, some of you may not be, and there are those who are not in the Valley. I have so much empathy for you because it is somewhat a bubble here, right? Like you could go online, you could read about all these companies and all these jobs, but you don't know what's real, what's not real, what's a good company, quote unquote, what's a bad company, quote unquote, to join. I actually hustled. That's how I got a job here. This is in 2013, so it wasn't as boisterous and full of jobs as it is now. But I actually booked a 1-week trip from Singapore to San Francisco, and I reached out to some friends at the time and said, hey, what are the top, you know, X companies I should be looking at? My ex-boyfriend worked in venture. He literally gave me a list. Marketo was on the list. I think I emailed somebody through LinkedIn that I had known through a very loose connection and said, hey, I'm going to be in San Francisco from X to Y. Will you have lunch with me? And I'll never forget his name, Mark Sheridan. He was the VP of Biz Dev, super nice guy. He actually was like, sure, I'll take you up on it. And so he actually, I think we had a quick coffee, and then he actually referred me to the recruiter at the time they were hiring in product marketing. I had no idea that Marketo, what Marketo was, what marketing automation was. I had no idea that, what a quote unquote true SaaS business was. I'd worked on Azure a little bit in Singapore when I was leaving and I was running that business, but it was a transition, right? You can imagine at Microsoft, I was selling mostly to IT pros, developers, system administrators, etc. Now I was being asked to market to marketers, which really ups your game, right? In terms of the creme de la creme, because marketers can really smell out some bullshit. So as these stories go, again, they were like, Shyna, we love your enterprise experience. You're smart, you're scrappy. You can come and do the basics. And so I came in and I was like, okay, this is great. This is going to be an enterprise company, right? I had been used to, like I said, selling to the Global 1000 at Microsoft. And I got there, I logged into their CRM, which is of course Salesforce versus Dynamics at Microsoft. It's a whole more systems, but, and I literally had 3 to 5 enterprise customers, like GE, Panasonic, I forget the exact customers, but everyone else was up and down. We call it the 101 here, which is the big freeway that runs in Silicon Valley to San Francisco. So I was like, all right, this is like a different motion for me. At Microsoft, I was used to chasing $1 million deals to hit quota or to hit our number, right? We got a $2 million deal at Target that we really got to bring in this quarter. At Marketo, I had to get used to chasing $20,000 deals. And so it was just a very different motion, a different speed. There were things that I loved about it. Obviously, I learned a lot about how to bring products to market in a SaaS environment, how to think about business strategy, how to think about messaging and positioning and category creation, all these things that we're going to talk about. But it also taught me a lot about what I wanted in personal values, right? And what I value and how important is title, how important is money, how important is freedom and flexibility, how important is location, how important is community to me in my personal life as I started to build that out. And then ever since then, I will save you a long story, but I went on a self journey and I learned a lot about, if I want to live my ideal life, which is around freedom and flexibility, yet bring something that I think people really want into this world, then I should, build my own company. And I was lucky enough to have some people really take a chance on me and take me on as a product marketing consultant. And that's how I make a living nowadays mostly. So I have a product marketing company and I help a lot of startups, but everything from, seed through, I would say, series, even public companies actually take products to market, whether that be a new geography, a new solution, a new audience, etc. I also run Product Marketing Masters, which hopefully you've taken a look at our website and have joined the community. But it's a group of 500 plus passionate product marketers who are really sharing best practices, networking, building and honing in on the craft of product marketing. And then now you're part of it as well, in the sense that I teach these online courses because I really, really, really want the next generation of product marketers to be fantastic thinkers and to be able to push the limits and bring just really great products to market. So as you can probably tell, I'm pretty transparent, for better or for worse. I'm happy to do any sort of career coaching, any sort of counseling, negotiating, what's the right level, how do you go and get that first job, how should you think about your compensation package, etc. one-on-one. Please just reach out to me. I am only here where I am today because I've stepped on the shoulders, which is a very cliche way of saying, of some incredible mentors and people that taught me a lot. And so if anything, I feel like it's a privilege that I need to pay forward, and it's something I frankly really enjoy doing as well. So feel free to shoot me a note, and thanks so much, and look forward to connecting.